Welcome back, KXEL Live and Local in this 8 o'clock hour on a Wednesday. And we are in early November, and time to focus on a new issue of Iowa History Journal. The publication comes out 6 times a year. The November-December issue finishes Volume 16. And joining us via Zoom from his home base in the Des Moines metro area, publisher and editor Michael Swanger. Good morning, sir. Thank you for the time.
Good morning, Jeff. Always a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for having me on your show.
It is always a treat when Iowa History Journal shows up in the mail. IowaHistoryJournal.com is where you go to get your subscription. But it was especially of interest to me when I picked up the magazine and I said, I know that scene, because on the cover is the maintenance shop. Now, lest some people think that we're talking about a boiler room in some large building, please enlighten those who are unaware. What is the maintenance shop?
The maintenance shop is arguably one of the best listening rooms in the state, as you know, Jeff, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners know that as well. It's a music venue that has been located on the campus of Iowa State University in Ames since 1974. This is their 50th anniversary, and it is one of the premier live music venues in the state, and not only because of the quality of acts that it attracts and continues to do, but for all the legends that it's hosted over the years. And that's where we come into play because of the history of the maintenance shop. It's certainly old enough for us to be writing about, and certainly the artists that have played there over the years many of them are quite historic, frankly. So we thought it was a good fit. It was the right time to do it.
When I taught at Iowa State in particular, but living in Marshalltown even before and after that, the M Shop, as it's known, was a frequent haunt of ours, whether it was Arlo Guthrie or Robin and Linda Williams and their fine group, Todd Snyder, others. The venue has an eclectic feel, an intimate feel, and as you say, from a sound standpoint, and you're a music guy, far more than I am, but that is something that you don't just find everywhere, especially tucked in a corner of the Memorial Union at Iowa State.
No, you don't. I think anyone who's been at the maintenance shop understands this, that from the moment when you enter the M shop at the front door, you're already above the stage and the floor and the bar, etc. So as you walk through the front door, for those who haven't been, you descend down a small ramp, and all of a sudden there you are. And it's a small venue that only hosts 195 people capacity. And before you know it, a few steps beyond the front door, you're near the stage. There's a bar over in the corner. To the right is the soundboard, the stairs that lead up to the green room that's been there for a long time. But it's such a small place that you can't help but feel the reverence of the room. It's a brick. It has brick walls. It has a concrete floor. Typically, those things are not conducive to great sound. But when you have a great sound system, you have people who know how to run it, then it's certainly the exception to the rule. And that's always been the case at the M Shop. The quality of the sound there, everything from its thrust stage that kind of penetrates into the audience and allows people to sit very close to the performers, to its pin drop acoustics, to the intimacy, the whole vibe of it. There's a real feeling of reverence and awe that you get there that you just don't get at many other venues. And I would also argue that, or say that, there are few venues that cater to such a variety of genres of music as the M Shop does, save then some of the ballrooms, obviously, over the years. As far as a club goes, that's very rare. Most clubs have to specialize in a specific genre of music to make it. And even then, there's no guarantee they last that long, let alone 50 years. And there's only one other club, as I found out after we published our story, that's been around that long that I know of in Iowa. And so that's Gabe's Oasis in Iowa City. They just celebrated their 50th. But I think the maintenance shop really was the one for us to write about right now because of its reputation. It just seems to be so well known nationally that everyone who's involved in the live music industry knows about the M Shop.
And Gabe's Oasis in Iowa City, as I recall, the club is up on a second level, and it's much more of a traditional bar dance club. I mean, it has the flexibility to do all those things. The flexibility within the M shop is they either have rows of chairs or they have
Yeah.
tables. And the tables give you a coffee shop atmosphere, but, and I can speak from personal experience, if you're sitting and they're just the rows of chairs, you can just put your feet on the front of the stage, set your beer there if you like. I mean, it's just the reverence juxtaposed with the connection you have with the artists. They take a break and they mingle with the crowd. You know, they don't go hiding backstage. They have to walk, as you say, down the stairs from the green room up to the stage so that you're literally, you know, they're brushing by you as they go to perform. I
Yes.
mean, again, that's just a vibe you don't get many places.
No, and on top of that, as you know, they host more than music now. We're writing about the live music aspect of the M Shop, which is really what is put it on the map over the years. But they have hosted comedy and theater and speeches. And when it first started 50 years ago, it was really intended to be a place for students to hang out because they were getting their lunch there in the Union. They were going into the M Shop to have a place to mingle with their peers, have some coffee, grab a sandwich. It was a very casual, intimate setting intended for students to just have a place to gather. And that was the origin of the M Shop because it went back as far as 1972 when a group of students from the Student Union Board started going around the Memorial Union looking for a place to open up a spot where they could gather to host entertainment, whether it was comedy, theater, or music. And more importantly, to have a place to have a beer on campus. Because at that time, I was drinking age was 18. There was nothing available on campus, and they wanted to have a place there where they could enjoy some beer. So that's how it started. They were going around trying to look into doors that were locked when a janitor noticed them doing that and said, "Oh, well, there's a place downstairs that we call it the old maintenance shop, and it's filled with a broken piano and old chairs and tables, and it's a dusty room, but maybe this is this place for you." And that's how it was born, and that's how it got its name. And then 2 years later, it's up and running, hosting just an array of national acts. It just blows your mind when you go back and look at it. And here we are talking about it 50 years later.
Michael Swanger of Iowa History Journal joining us. He is the author of the cover story in the current issue, The Maintenance Shop, Pleasing Ears for 50 Years. And there have been clubs that have come and gone, not even clubs, but venues, I'll say. I mean, I remember the St. John's Coffee House, occasional concerts in Des Moines that then moved to the old Masonic Temple. It had its time and then things change. As different venues have come and gone, as you know, this is the one that's been here for a half a century. And you'll notice when you look at the cover, this beautiful stained glass window, and it's a bit understated in terms of its coloration, but it is absolutely iconic as part of the M Shop logo. It's an interesting story of how that wound up being hung on the wall.
It really is, Jeff. I'm glad you pointed it out because that really is the identifying piece of the maintenance shop is the large stained glass window that adorns the stage. It's the story behind the stained glass window is that when they were creating the maintenance shop in the early 70s, this is before it was obviously open. A couple of the students went to a church auction out in the country and they found the large window. I think they bought it for $150. Well, it was too big to get in to the doors, so they cut it into two pieces. So the large piece you see over the stage is the main piece, and then the smaller piece is the one that hangs above the bar. And I think the stained glass, as you know, is what really gives the place its reverence, its feeling of awe. And we could go on and wax poetic about the connection between stained glass and live music, whether it's secular music or sacred music. There's always been a connection there, and that's what makes the M Shop so unique because you're sitting there and it feels like you are having an experience because it's not like your typical bar setting or with just lights. I mean, here we are with this beautiful stained glass window and behind the performers, and it really kind of sets the mood in the sense that everything that happens there on stage kind of transcends culture and time.
Now, as I mentioned, you're a music guy. You play music, you have written about music, and this is something that I can tell you really have enjoyed because you knew an awful lot of this story just by living in central Iowa. Yes, you had to do research, etc., but how much fun was this for a music guy?
It really was, and it kind of for me was going down memory lane because for the better part of my 20-year career as a newspaper man, I worked as a music critic. Excuse me. So I spent a lot of time at the maintenance shop. I spent a lot of years interviewing and previewing shows, interviewing artists who were playing the maintenance shop to preview their shows. I went up there, I photographed a lot of shows, I reviewed a lot of the shows. And so it got to be like a second home to me. And I also devoted my column to the maintenance shop's 50th anniversary, where I thought, well, this is my opportunity to go down memory lane and share just some of the shows that I'd seen over the years that were some of the highlights. I probably only mentioned a third of the shows that I'd been to over the years. And I was always lucky to have a great rapport with the directors who were there because, as we all know, it's a student-run operation, but there's an adult, if you will, an older person typically who is the director there, who kind of oversees it and makes sure everything runs smoothly. But the credit goes to the students, the kids over the years, and their taste in music. And a lot of it is catching artists on the way up, and some of the veteran artists catching them. I wouldn't say on the way down, but it's really the established artists, the legends, the people who've been around, guys like Arlo Guthrie, as you mentioned, or Leon Redbone, or Greg Allman. They wanted to play it because it was an opportunity for them to connect to a small audience again, because they didn't get that opportunity playing larger venues over the years. So this was a chance for them to kind of go back to their roots and remind them what it's like to have that feeling of intimacy, because that's really the gist of live music, is that feeling of intimacy.
And you're right, it's not on the way down. It's where they get to a certain point and they appreciate some of
Yeah,
those earlier venues because, again, to some degree, it's much more gratifying when you can literally connect with someone. And I remember a show where the power went out right in the middle of a set. And it was Robin and Linda Williams and their fine group, as it was billed at the time. And so what did they do? They simply pivoted and said, well, I guess we'll do some a cappella numbers. And because, again, the room was configured the way it was, you could be heard, right? You didn't necessarily
sure.
need the microphone. And they were then taking requests from the audience. I mean, it was just and then the power came on and you almost went, oh, that's too bad.
It only Robin and Linda could pull something like that off,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Because they've played there every year. They're the
Yes.
only act to have done that. They're so comfortable there. I interviewed them back in the 90s, and I remember them talking about it was just a second home to them. So that's wonderful that it would happen during their show. There's something
That's right.
right about that because they could handle that kind of interruption that maybe some other artists couldn't.
The Maintenance Shop at Iowa State University, the cover story of Iowa History Journal, the publisher's perspective column, and the cover story, both written by our guest, Michael Swanger, the owner and publisher of IHJ. IowaHistoryJournal.com is where you go to subscribe, learn more information, and there's also a long list of places where you can pick up your second and third copies on the newsstand. It's also interesting to me for the Maintenance Shop, and again, this is a major university. There have been times that the union was under construction. That made it difficult to get access. And I'm sure real estate is at a premium, and I am sure there have been plenty of campus planners over time who have coveted that space because they could do something else with it, but yet the M Shop perseveres.
It does. And when you think about the shows don't hold a lot of people per se, right? We said 195 maximum, but yet the Memorial Union itself draws tens of thousands of people, not just Iowa State students, but the public too every year. When I interviewed the director, the current director of the maintenance shop, he said that the student union board hosted 100 events, for example, last year, attracting about 100,000 people. So even though that's the M Shop is a small part of the equation in terms of the overall numbers of people that they're drawing, it's an important one. And it's also because of its history. It's so steeped in the history of the campus and the union building itself, but it's huge with alumni. And it's great because it not only attracts the students still because they're they're bringing in the bands that the kids today want to see, but then they're bringing in bands that older guys like you and I still want to see, and that's the beauty of it because they're really starting to pull in generations of fans now. They don't even have to really promote it. They've even told me that over the years with the artists, they don't have to go looking for acts. The acts all come to them. They want to play the M Shop, and especially with its location here at the crossroads between Kansas City, Minneapolis, Chicago, Omaha, all those traveling artists want to play there and grab a night on their schedule that they can where they otherwise can't play. It's a great place for them to be, and it's a great place as a live music fan to be, and a musician too. I can tell you from having played the stage once, had the honor of playing there, it's just a great room.
And to that point, the fact that you have so many generations. And when I was teaching at Iowa State, I would be in line because it was usually free for all, right? General admission. You try to line up at the door. And I would see some of my students and they'd have their parents in tow because it was a show that the parents really wanted to see and they kind of drugged the kid along and all of a sudden the kid was a fan. That's the cover story.
I have to
No,
interrupt
please,
if you don't
please.
mind, because I know that you saw Robin and Linda Williams. Maybe
Yes.
I'm putting on the spot, but you were there, and so I'm sure you have wonderful memories and stories of all the shows you saw there. Who else stood out to you? Who else did you see there that really resonates with you still today?
Well, from a family connection, going to see Arlo Guthrie in the early 90s when he
Yeah.
was coming back on tour again. And that was another mixture of the college students were tuned into it, but yet those of us who were far older than college students. But I do recall Mr. Guthrie is well known for many songs, one of which is Alice's Restaurant. And because it's 18 and a half minutes long, it was not performed in concert for the better part of 2 decades. But it was coming up on an anniversary. I think it was the 25th anniversary of the release of the song. And he was performing with his adult son, Abe. Abe did the keyboards, Arlo did keyboards and guitar. They took the break, and then after the break, Mr. Guthrie comes back on stage alone and tunes up the guitar, and somebody yells out, "Where's Abe?" And he looks up and says, "I don't need Abe for this one," and launched into the refrain of Alice's Restaurant, and the place was like, oh my gosh. We did not expect this because it hadn't been done for, again, a generation.
Sure.
And so you remember certain things like that. You remember who you went to the concert with. As I said, when the power goes out, you remember that. And I know Tim Harwood, especially when he was living in that area, they would go to the M Shop. And so we all have some pretty good memories of different events there. And again, of jockeying for position as Rusty opened the door.
I love it, Jeff. That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. I'm glad you told me about that.
Michael Swanger is our guest. Iowa History Journal, cover story, maintenance shop. We have much more to discuss, but we're going to take a break. Bottom of the hour material as per custom. That's the Larry Kudlow commentary, the opening Bloomberg Money Minute, Fox News and Weather, and more on the other side as KXEL Live and Local continues on a Wednesday on News Talk 1540 KXEL, where Iowa comes to talk. Welcome back. KXEL Live and Local continuing in this 8 o'clock hour on a Wednesday, and we continue the conversation via Zoom with Michael Swanger. Mr. Swanger is the publisher and owner of Iowa History Journal, iowahistoryjournal.com. The brand new November-December issue is out. The Maintenance Shop, music and entertainment venue in Ames, is on the cover. The story penned by the aforementioned Mr. Swanger, who did double duty, not just the publisher's perspective, but the cover story, and apparently your work and the staff double duty in other ways. Arvid Huseman not only has a column, but a tremendous biographical sketch of Reverend Robert Shuller.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. It was wonderful of Arvid to write a feature story for us. I feel lucky to get one or two out of him every year because, as you know, he's such a devoted columnist, and that's been his forte for IHG over the years. And by the way, let's not skip over the column because it's Arvid has such a wonderful touch all year round. But there's something about his holiday columns that are very touching.
Yes.
And the one he writes for our current issue about his memories of being young during Christmas time is just another one. So I'll just kind of leave it at that without giving it away. But back to your tease here, what you mentioned, the feature story that Arvid wrote was one that he pitched to me about a year ago, and it's about the Reverend Robert Schuller. Those who may recall the popular Hour of Power television show will know that name. For years, my goodness, it was on from 1970 until he retired in 2006. It was a worldwide television show that attracted millions of viewers. And what I did not know was that he was from Iowa, that he was born on a farm near Alton in a small community in northwest Iowa's Sioux County, and he was the youngest of five children. And he just never wanted to be a farmer. He didn't enjoy farm work growing up. At a very young age, he had an uncle who was in the ministry, and what his uncle did appealed to him, and he would talk to him about it. And he knew from a very young age that this is what he wanted to do, that he wanted to be a preacher. He's just one of those people who was blessed to know exactly what it was that he wanted to do for a living. And so it seemed only right then that he would go on to do what he did. But as you know, he wasn't a traditional preacher. He moved to California, founded a church where it wasn't in a building, it was in a drive-in movie theater. And folks could pull up and put the radio in the window, just like you were going to go see a movie at the drive-in and listen to him preach. And that's how he got started.
And the backlash that he got at that time because, well, you just didn't do this.
No.
And he brought home to people the fact that there's no one way to worship. There's no one way a church looks. I mean, the Crystal Cathedral. I mean, what an undertaking. And
Right.
again, to your point, the various venues where there would be the drive-in movie theater, but then that begat the Crystal Cathedral and the wall that would open because there were more people than could attend in person inside. I mean, just amazing stuff. And again, it's a kid like Arvid from Northwest Iowa.
That's right. And when he moved to California to plant this church, really, as you say, it was so unorthodox at the time. If you can imagine back then, in the 50s, or excuse me, in the 60s, really, to have people come out to a drive-in movie theater to attend church every Sunday. And it was that's just how driven he was. I mean, that's how much he believed in what he was doing, the message that he had to deliver, that it would work. And certainly he worked hard enough at it to make it work. And I think the first one that he held was in 1955. It attracted 28 vehicles. And of course, the Crystal Cathedral, for those who don't know, that's in a suburb of Los Angeles, grew to be one of the most amazing, most ornate churches, really, in the United States, and in Garden Grove there. And so it was all from his vision, from a guy from a small town in northwest Iowa. I think that's probably why I really resonate with Arvid. That's his backyard.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible to think about what he went on to achieve over the years. The church is still going. It's in the hands of his grandson now. And Arvid just takes the reader through the history of the church and to where it is now. But really, the fascinating part of the story is the church's impetus and how it got planted, and that's all because of Mr. Schuller.
Robert Schuller, an Iowa farm boy who didn't like farm life, became a world-famous preacher. That's the title for the piece written by Arvid Huseman. And Arvid also remembers Christmas songs, as we'll be doing on KXEL before too much longer. Chick Powers will have his daily inside story behind the Christmas songs. That's coming up Thanksgiving week, and that's his column. As an afterthought, we'll point out that the second part of an excellent two-part series on Glenn Miller of Clarinda appears in this issue. And I say afterthought because we've been talking about these other things, but this is a real interesting take by, again, an author, as we mentioned the last time, who really knows this topic.
Well, this is the second part of our series written by Dennis Sprague. You and I spoke about it for our last issue because it was the cover story kicking off this series. I couldn't think of anyone better to write about Glenn Miller, but specifically the second part of our series and what it addresses, which is Glenn's military service and Unfortunately, something that people think about as much as his life was his mysterious death. And Dennis has spent decades researching this. He's got to know the family. He and has talked to them over the years. He's really had a lot of insider information about Glenn's career and his mysterious death, and he debunks all those conspiracy theories that are out there. And we know that all you have to do is click a couple buttons online to find things like that. And unfortunately, there are still a lot of conspiracy theories out there swirling about how Glenn died. But Dennis, without giving everything away, gets to the heart of the matter in the story and has evidence to back it up. And it's interesting, not only about we kind of overlook everything that Glenn did with his military service, which alone is just incredible and patriotic, but the fact that he gets into the details about what happened on that fateful day, which we're approaching the 80th anniversary of, is almost worth the price of admission for this issue alone.
And I should note for the audience, we are doing the conversation via Zoom, and so that means I can see you. And you are wearing today a University of Northern Iowa sweatshirt. And so it's only right that we conclude the conversation by referencing a story in this publication about UNI men's basketball, and the author is our own Tim Harwood. Tell me about this.
We would be remiss if we didn't talk about Tim's good work. My goodness.
I would hear about it.
We yes, so would I think so that no, I'm always happy when we can come up with stories about the state universities. I know the other two get written about more than UNI, which is my alma mater. And Tim pitched the story to me about UNI men's basketball making the transition from Division II to Division I during the 1980-81 season. And when I went to UNI, it was from 90 to 92. They just come off that big win against Missouri in the NCAA tournament, and that win kind of put them on the map nationally. But what this story reminds us of is that this team, the 1980-81 team, is the team that really put put the Panthers on the D1 map. And he does a great job of interviewing some of the former players. He has some great photos in here. For those who are obviously UNI basketball fans like we are, we wouldn't have all those great moments, those runs in the NCAA tournament in '04, '05, '06, '09, the big one in 2010 with Ali Farouk hitting the shot heard around the world to beat KU. We wouldn't have those moments if this team hadn't put in the hard work and taken the lumps and grinded through that first season. And Tim just does a great job of kind of putting it all in that perspective while giving us all the details that we want about that first year as a D1 program.
Very similar to the story you did, I think, just in the previous issue about Iowa State football under Johnny Majors and how the success that they have today was built based upon those mid-1970s teams that, again, you wouldn't have the football stadium that you have, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is such a great piece, and Tim is such an excellent researcher and writer. So this gives us the foundation of Panther D1 men's basketball, and it goes back to 80-81. All right, where do we get our second, third, perhaps fourth copies of the magazine, in addition to subscribing at iowahistoryjournal.com?
Well, Jeff, we're sold at every Barnes & Noble in the state and a few just outside of it. We're at most Hy-Vee stores, Books A Million. If you go onto our website, iowahistoryjournal.com, you can find a list of retail outlets in your town. That's one way to do it. You can also just buy the magazine or subscribe on our website. And of course, this time of year, we encourage folks to keep us in mind as a gift because we sell a lot of gift subscriptions this time of year. And it's a wonderful gift for less than $20 that doesn't disappear in a day or two. It lasts the whole year.
And it's always the right size.
It's always the right size and the right color.
Yes.
You can't mess it up.
And the good thing about it is this is really a great gift for people who either lived here and departed, maybe they retired to some other place. This is a great publication because it brings it all full circle. And I know this based upon the letters you get and the orders that we get at totallyiowa.com for various merchandise. It's pin in the map kind of stuff across the country. Iowa History Journal, iowahistoryjournal.com. Michael Swanger, thanks so much for wrapping up Volume 16.
Thank you, Jeff. Happy holidays.
And the same to you, sir. We'll talk after the first of the year, if not before. Still to come, we've got the Bottom Line Report and another Bloomberg Money Minute. That's all before 9 o'clock as KXEL Live and Local rolls on a Wednesday on News Talk 1540 KXEL, where Iowa comes to talk.